Hey, welcome back to the Cybersecurity Matchmaker. It is season 2, episode 2, and we're theming it this season, and we're really kind of getting to the heart of marketing. Having people on the show who maybe wouldn't call themselves marketers necessarily. So Scott, you're the one who I'm scared about today, calling you a marketer because you are. I don't think you call yourself that. So
I'll self-identify.
okay, great.
Let's
Okay.
just go there and have fun with it. Yeah.
Cool. All right, cool. So, there's always that element that it won't be appreciated, but we're calling people marketers who may not call themselves marketers, coming from a place of really believing that to be a good marketer is to be a good human and to understand the humans that you're interacting with and what that's all about. And Danny's whole thing is all about that right now. Dani Woolf came from being, this is how I describe her, a badass marketer, and she has recently hung up her own shingle as a technologist whisperer. I made that up. Dani said she's using it. I think we're like official.
Yeah.
Um, okay, and you're doing customer stuff, and you'll be able to share a little bit more about the details of what you're up to at the end, and get intros from anyone who's open to it. But we're so excited to have you, like kind of coming from the two sides of the spectrum. So we have Dani, who was a marketer and now is like really got the ear of the technologist. And then we've got Scott, who, you have a long career of being a practitioner. But in looking at a lot of your work, I've seen your whole thing is kind of having the empathy for regular people to understand what is going on in the depths of all this technology. And I think with both of those things, you've both kind of seen something that wasn't working in our community, and instead of complaining about it, you kind of just make your own thing happen. So that's why I thought the two of you would be perfect to match together on the Cybersecurity Matchmaker. So welcome to both of you. Scott Scheferman is the Office of the CTO for Eclypsium, which is an award-winning firmware security company.
I hear babies.
I love
Yeah,
babies.
is my kid crying in the background? That's probably it. That's why I'm like muting in and out, so it'll like be waves of crying and not crying. So,
and then it just reminds me how happy I am that my kids are at school. So it's all good. So thank you all for coming. And I do just I want to take a moment, Scott, to recognize your friend Vitaly. Scott lost a friend from the industry, and I just wanted to give you a moment to just share a bit of his legacy and just kind of give a moment to his soul.
Oh, appreciate that. Yeah. So Vitaly Kremens, he's a titan in the industry. He's been around for a long time, but he's done so much to really kind of bring down the worst of the worst criminals around the world, cyber criminals, thugs,
Wow.
mafia, you name it. He's really, worked at DOJ for a long time and then has his own company. And heart goes out to his family and all of his coworkers, which are like his family.
Wow.
He was a refugee from Belarus and came to America and just wanted to live this dream and succeed and make himself as strong as he could. So my heart really goes out to his wife, Natalia, and their whole family and family to come. And I don't really know what to say other than he had a heart of gold. We're all going to miss him. He's, got thousands of followers that have been pinging me and everybody else for 3-4 days straight. Luckily, they just found his body. It was a scuba diving accident, unfortunately, off of Hollywood, Florida.
Oh, man.
And they finally did find his body. So his body's coming home. Closure for the family, but and for all of us that were, just praying that he was alive, but he wasn't. So with a tear, just 3 seconds of silence. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it really does speak to the kind of community that the cybersecurity community is, that people really have these real relationships, which shamelessly, I want to bring into this idea. I was talking to an Australian the other day about American sales, and needless to say, was not a fan of American sales. And I always like to defend, but he was saying, oh, just you can only sell to your friends, so you have to create a bunch of fake friendships. And I said, I would argue that. I would say there are some really beautiful friendships that come in this industry between practitioners, but I've seen beautiful relationships happen even between people who are selling to and being sold to. There's something very, very deep about what we do here in cybersecurity and what we're protecting. So I, just as a segue into what we're talking about with customers is like, clearly there's so many people who, have these real relationships. And when somebody is lost, it's felt in the community. So what I want to get into is it's origin stories. It's how did you first know that you thought like a marketer? And Scott, like if that comes as like, abrasive because you don't call yourself a marketer, when did you know that you were somebody who could explain things and formulate things in a more digestible way than other people significantly to become that? So let's just start with each of you. Like I last week I just told a story of like when I was really little and I was watching commercials, but this week I'll just say something. I really like good commercials. Like I love them. They make me happy, and bad commercials make me angry. And that is something that I know about myself, why I'm a marketer. So I'll throw it out to you guys. Something like that.
Dani, go for it.
Yeah. Wow. Oh man, I'm put on the spot first. That's a tough question. If I think about it now, I'd say it would probably be around my college days. I was a studio art major, so I was painting and creating things all day. And so I got to tap into a lot of emotions. I got to really tap into my genuine curiosity to explore things from different lenses of the world in order to create things and tell stories. And I realized looking back now that curiosity, emotion, and kind of understanding other people's view of the world, because when you sit inside a studio and you have 15 other artists critiquing your work, you got to kind of take it. You have to objectively accept that subjective critique. And so I think looking back now, it was around the college days really deeply.
Cool. That's cool because it's like
Yeah.
you're kind of saying when you're an artist and you have art and you have people digesting your art, you can't force them to take it the way you want to take it. When you create art, it's like it's out there, so it's going to be interpreted, and that is a really interesting first step into the mind of an audience. So that's super cool as an origin story. Scott, what about you? Coming from a technical mind. Oh, I think we lost your audio.
Bam. Better?
It's back. It's back.
I muted myself. I have a person at the door. I'm just gonna ignore him. I'm also an artist, as it happens. So I feel that because nothing is more intellectual and more emotional than art. And I've always felt in cybersecurity, even the largest $1 million sales or deals or ideas are still at the end of the day an emotional decision to hit the button in the last hour to say, yes, I'm going to buy that. I'm going to commit to it for my organization. All those last minute doubts that you have, the only thing that pushes you over the edge at the last minute is that emotional decision that what you're doing is the right thing. It's the most important thing. It aligns with why you got out of bed in the morning, why you exist in your career in the first place. What is your legacy? Or what also on the fear side, honestly, like so many of our buyers in cybersecurity are operating 99% of the time out of fear. And so, while you don't want to play into fears, as a marketeer, right, or a salesperson, you need to be sensitive to that and have empathy or even sympathy if you've felt that fear as well with them, and let them know, hopefully, that what you're doing allows them to have less of that fear. So I really do tie it back to emotional rather than conceptual kind of selling or marketing or messaging.
It's really interesting because do you guys hear that echo?
No.
Yeah, a little bit of feedback.
You're hearing the feedback? It's because I don't know why. So
sometimes we don't always have the answers, and that's okay.
We don't. But I do say this a lot, and I think it a lot think a lot about cybersecurity and how there is this kind of deeply emotional element to it. We're dealing with fear, but yet you can't, to play on an emotion like fear is cruel and terrible, but to recognize it is a different thing. And I love that. And I love when that gets brought up in our community, because any purchase is about mitigation of some risk, which means, fear of something happening. So that's very cool. And like, I do challenge, I'm curious if the audience, um, or you guys has any thought about like what other industry is like this besides the military, which is not an industry. It's something else. But what other industry has this element of like such strong emotion?
Well, I did a lot of work in the DFIR incident response space, right? So when you go into an organization, they're having their worst day and everybody is all torn up and emotional as well. For me, it's much akin to like a firefighter.
Okay.
You're not dealing with heat and actually saving a life. We're kind of at that precipice in cyber with all the destructive attacks hitting OT environments, but that outlier kind of case aside, you recognize that you're not at that level of risk and danger to yourself and literally saving lives. But that aside, the analogies and the desire to truly help somebody who is in need in their worst moment, they're helpless. They don't know what to do. They have the fog of war, like the smoke in the room. They're afraid, for their careers. They just, it's really a time where you're just like vulnerable as a person. And the whole team is, the whole organization and all
Right.
the stakeholders around it, right? So I feel like it's kind of like that. You go in, you don't know what to expect when you go into a fire. There's going to always be chaos and dangers and risks and, things you don't want to step on. But at the end of the day, like it's about having resolve and putting out that fire and then fireproofing the house afterwards. So I've kind of just mentally associated with that. I think maybe
That's
the
cool.
medical industry is like that too, with all
The medical industry has
Mhm.
an element to it, but I almost feel like doctors sometimes, to do all that surgery, you have to really like actually disassociate from the emotion in a way. And the emotion has to stay present, I think, in cybersecurity, because you're battling something that's human. So but no, but like yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a vitality in the medical industry, but there is like this kind of ideal of separating emotionally that, I just, this industry is great, right? We're all in it. So Danny, I would love to hear from you. Like, you went full on into this space of communicating, being there, like what are we calling you? A technologist whisperer. So right, we're calling you that. So tell us a little bit about, like, abbreviated but point to point. You were a marketer, and now you found yourself with the ear of the
Mm.
practitioners. And what do you think is the piece of the way that you are doing things, and like doing things differently? You're on your own now, so you're really free to just explore all the things that maybe vendors like aren't as free to do. I'd love to hear about your experience right now, communicating with practitioners. Oh, any security field is like this to some extent. That's actually a great point. Like, security, physical security is probably very similar. Thank you, Paul. So yeah, Danny, can you just share with us a little bit of what you found, like, since you've left
Yeah.
that vendor world? It's like,
Yeah. Um, so I've been a digital marketer, demand gen marketer for almost over 12 years, actually, working for different B2B technology vendors. I ventured into cybersecurity almost 5 years ago and realized that that world is completely different than the other vertical industries I was working in.
right.
I've worked in, cloud tech, big pharma, you know, to B2C, some B2B to C tech. I mean, this industry is so unique, and the way that I was doing things as a marketer in other industries didn't fit the bill in the
And
security industry.
not just because you can't sell on FUD.
Yes,
Much bigger,
100%.
much bigger.
I have the list of trivial tasks somewhere in a LinkedIn post, but I found it extremely challenging as a demand gen marketer working for high growth startups that expect 2x growth, 3x growth in such a short period of time, to accomplish that, particularly when I don't have access to customer insight or access to talk to customers or
Mhm.
even reach my ideal audience and get feedback from them on a regular basis. I felt like the foundations were lacking for me. And I learned very quickly, I shifted my mindset kind of halfway through and realized that instead of pushing for persuasion and trying to hook some kind of conversation with my buyer, I need to go back to step one and the foundation, and the core of being a marketer is understanding who my buyer is and what makes them tick and what are their challenges. I have to put myself in their shoes, and I wasn't doing that for the longest time, and that really burnt me out and underwhelmed me, overwhelmed me and underwhelmed me at the same time.
That makes sense.
Um, and and once I made that mind shift, it was much easier to do my job
Cool.
as a digital marketer and demand gen marketer. But I still saw that there was a prevalent issue in the industry across, with several other colleagues working for other security firms. They were running shady tactics that just don't work with buyers, because I hear it.
Right.
You do general OSINT, and you listen to CISOs, complain about
They're not
what
shy. They're not a
they're
shy
not shy.
bunch.
You do regular legwork and research, and you hear what doesn't work, and still you hear marketers running these tactics. And I thought that was a complete disservice to the industry, because you
Cool.
hear the pain in practitioners, voices, that it's just causing more friction and complexity to what they need to do initially.
I think there's something about this, like, okay, digging into this idea that it is a unique industry. Actually, Paul just mentioned something in the comments. Selling to the prospect of prevention, it's tricky, and also it's hard to prove. Of course, it's hard to prove. I always say I am sure that there is some really shady companies out there that are actually like finding ways to prove the effectiveness or whatever it is. But I would say there's so many pieces that make it so hard to sell that it is an industry where I do think you're almost forced to do marketing properly. And back to, the critique of American salespeople, that you can't shortcut those relationships. And I think
Well,
that's when I read a lot of your content, I hear that. And Scott, I'm curious, do you you're with a vendor, but in a technical capacity, but your role is evangelizing. So I'd love to hear where your meeting point is,
Yeah.
kind of, Danny's coming from up to actually you're kind of in a similar place speaking to similar people. And how did you come into that?
Yeah. So yeah, I did like 17 years supporting like DoD mission systems and as a practitioner and all of that, right, with a lot of responsibility. But I got out of that industry when I figured out that the government, the federal government, moved so slow that it couldn't keep up with the threat landscape. That was upsetting me. So at the time, I went to work for FireEye because they could see callback detection, had detonation chambers, and the DoD didn't even have either of that really technology at the time,
Scary,
right?
scary to hear, but okay.
Um, so for me, it's what was your actual question? I want to make sure I stay on
Oh,
point.
well, what I want to know, so like, we're kind of talking origin stories. So, you were a threat hunter. Was that what was your role when you were like
Okay,
super
origin.
technical? Yeah,
Okay,
origin story. So super technical. And then when did you start, like, what spurred you getting into being a person who talks about rather than just doing, and realizing, okay, I'm a guy who understands how to bridge these two things together, the
okay.
understanding and the technical.
I cut my teeth having to brief admirals, and you look an admiral in the eye, and you have to be zero BS, 100% fact based. You have to have confidence and conviction in what you're saying, and you have to have recommendations that are really concise. And you have to know how to say everything right up front, so you don't lead up to the punchline. You have to start with the punchline. We call that bottom line up front in the DoD, right? When I went to work for FireEye, I realized that the hardest part about that technology at the time, just like Silence after that and Sentinel-1 and here at Eclypsium as well, is that when you're in a new technology doing something new, which most cyber vendors claim that that's what they're doing. That's why they exist. They have a new way to do things.
And also nobody else is doing it. So
right. So like Paul's point about prevention, for example, right? Silence, when I walked in there, you remember, maybe it was like, we predict malware, but that didn't mean anything in 2016. And AI and ML in 2016 here in Tola, where I live in Texas, I was actually walked out of offices saying things like math is greater than malware, or we predict malware, because it's an empty statement and it's not believable in any sense. So you remember I came up with that predictive advantage concept, where I took an old model of the AI and I tested it against current malware 2 or 3 years later, after the model was ever created, and it was still able to catch it. And I could literally say, I can prove to you that we would have caught 75% of this malware that's still on your hard drives that your technology has been missing for 3 years. And not only that, I can disrupt the entire threat landscape economy of the bad guys, because before they even conceive of writing their code for new malware, the same algorithm a year prior would predict it, meaning you could prove the efficacy by taking today's malware against the old model, right? And no signatures. It was a pretty cool story at the time, but it's what it took to compel people that the technology was real, that it worked, and that it worked in their environment, because you found the malware that they missed. That was very convenient. FireEye was the same thing. I could bring in
very cool to be able to put your finger on something that's retrospective. I mean, that's way better than trying to sell on something in the future. Dani, I wanted to just quickly go back, because I love this thing. I mean, maybe we can bring some, the military wasn't as advanced as, let's say, the industry was, but the bottom line upfront terminology, I think if that was the way we describe cybersecurity marketing, I think we'd have a lot of happy buyers. Dani,
happier, because there are levels that you need to get through, and that's not just one of them.
Okay. I hear that. But that's a mind-blowing thing from a communication perspective. Like, why are we having to do all this thing leading up to it? Just tell me the bottom line. And yeah, I can definitely see that driving you towards like having to hone the messaging until you become somebody who's an evangelist. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So cool. All right. Well, sorry, did I interrupt you?
I was just you asked me a question, I didn't really answer it, which is,
okay.
What, or origin wise, why did I ended up doing well communicating about technology? And it's just because I got to a certain level of responsibility where I was forced to as part of the role, and that translated really well to messaging and marketing and leading. I lean way out in front as a strategist, right? So I'm selling a year or two out what the threat landscape's going to be, and that's kind of my specialty, because I'm from the future.
That is a real talent.
Right. And I try to align people with, like, where are they trying to go? Not now fighting fires and low hanging fruit and the noise of cybersecurity as an operational person, but rather, what are you trying to achieve? What does the end state goal look like? How do I align myself with what you actually want as a business, as an operation, as a mission? And
cool.
That's so in some sense, bottom line or front, but also, top down, aligning with vision and intention and what their genuine desire is. And Dani, to your point, you can't unpack that until you know the person.
Cool. You know what? That is so cool. I just heard this like concept of visionary. Like when you are, this is a thing about trauma. When you are freaked out, you can't envision the future. And so when I just was hearing you describe that, I heard like a totally new thing in this relationship of selling and, of vendors and practitioners, just this idea that they're in the thick of it. And if you can have somebody to show them what the future could look like, that is a very interesting way to give a vision of something greater. I never thought of it that way, but I did cut Dani off. I heard her.
No, I was just gonna say, I echoing what Scott was saying. I think that's so powerful, and that's why I went solo, is to help firms access that information and get their ears on that. Eyes, ears on that because not enough are accessing those insights, those desires, those motivations that are going to inform their strategy forward and shift their mindset. It's a mindset shift because you stated earlier that we're forced to do things this way, but unfortunately, Mimi, a lot of security firms are forced to do things the wrong way. And
Sure.
so
A lot of pressure.
there has to be this mindset shift that taps into what Scott was saying for sure.
That's so cool. Yeah, no, this is really great. I love when when I have guests on and this whole thing. Thanks, Terry. Terry's loving the discussion. I love when just a really clear theme kind of emerges, two people together who've never met before. And the theme here is that there is a real depth around the psychology and the emotions in our industry, and that tapping into that, there's no shortcut. If you're going to tap into that, you have to do it the right way, the real way. And it takes effort. And it's, clearly an incredible investment for both vendors and for practitioners to really look into how to deepen this relationship. So I'm so grateful to both of you because this is like so obvious a theme. Do you agree? Unless I'm calling out something that's not there. Do you both feel that that's kind of what came out? Anything else that we can add? I want to also share Dani, I want to let each of you kind of share. This is a matchmaking show. If there's anyone out, if you want to let the audience know who you want to be meeting right now and how to meet you. So Dani and then Scott, how can they reach you?
Yeah. Oh, so you can reach me through LinkedIn, Dani Woolf, WOOLF. I'm always active on LinkedIn, or you can visit audiencefirst.fm and listen to the great podcast we have with security practitioners
Really
to learn.
good stuff. Really
yeah,
good
a lot of really brutally honest conversations there. Scott would love to have you on, by the way.
Sure.
Love
when that happens. Love when that
Yeah.
happens. And then Scott, who do you want to meet? Who can reach out to you and be appreciated?
Where my heart is, it's been this way for 25 years in this industry, just because my first DEF CON and DEF CON 5 or whatever it was, people brought me under their wing right away. I asked the dumbest questions. And so my heart is on both the strategic side and then all the way to the other end of the spectrum, the very newest people we're getting into the industry that are just dipping their toes into this industry and the importance of that for the mission. Because honestly, this current crop of professionals we have, we're not very good. We did, I hate to say that, but like we didn't do the damn thing. We didn't get to the state we needed to get in the approach and the philosophy and the ownership and the responsibility and the AO. Like there's so many things that like even CISOs don't understand that they're doing wrong, like you said, kind of Mimi, because they assume this certain area. So I like to align at the highest levels and at the lowest levels.
Nice.
Yeah, I do threat intelligence and all that thing as well. And I like people that are focused on mission. So anybody who's focused on mission, which is making bad people have a bad day, right? Like, and anybody focused on like strategically trying to get ahead of something and trying to solve a strategic problem or a challenge. I love that. But also anybody who's brand new that's listening to this and just wants to know where to get started or wants an introduction or a resource to go look at, I'm always here 24/7.
That is so cool of you. Thank you. And then LinkedIn, is that good?
Yeah, that's where I live the most. Follow me there. My name is the same as spelled here, and it's the only one that'll really pop up.
Spelled it right. Okay. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank you both for coming and everybody for watching. This was really great, and we'll be posting some clips and just have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah. Dani, great to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. We'll chat.
We love introducing people. We can't help
Mimi, you're the best. You always bring people together. That's what you do.
That's my thing.